and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to share with you my top 5 tips for representing yourself successfully in court, in family court, against a narcissist. So these are going to be my tips that I learned along the way, and I'm going to share them with you. If you've been around my channel for a while, you know that I was in family court in custody litigation from 2013 to approximately 2020, 21. I can't remember the exact date, but many, many years. And so a lot of that, or a big portion of it, I'd say about maybe 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, I represented myself. And so these tips are things that I learned, and I want to share them with you on how to be successful, as I was successful in winning custody when I represented myself. Tip number 1 is to always be honest in court, even with parenting behaviors that you're not particularly proud of, that you've exhibited over the time that you have been co-parenting or even parenting with your other co-parent. And so you have to be honest, because the honesty is what is going to help establish your credibility in court. But I want to offer one caveat. When you're honest about the ugly behaviors that you're not proud of, or the ugly parenting behaviors that you're not proud of, I want you to be sure in those moments to take accountability when you can. So, for example, if you have some kind of substance abuse problem and it's documented either in texts or emails, or you may think that the other person doesn't know about it or the other side doesn't know about it. Maybe you've kept it under wraps for a while. If they have an attorney, those attorneys are going to find out about you. So it's better to be honest. So don't lie and try to cover it up somehow, because that is going to ruin your credibility. So it's good to just be honest about your parenting behaviors that you're not proud of. So how do you take accountability in those moments when you're kind of saying, yes, I did those things? You just kind of look to the judge and say, Your Honor, I do have a substance abuse problem, or I have had a substance abuse problem in the past. I've gone to rehab for it. I am in daily meetings. I've been sober since, whatever date it is. But don't say those things if they're not true. But when you go to court, if you haven't been to court yet, if you've demonstrated for a while that you have an ongoing problem as part of your parenting, like substance abuse, you got to start getting it cleaned up before you go to court. Even if you only have a month under your belt sober, it's good to be able to say that, because the substance abuse problem is going to come out in court. So if you can be honest about it and say the things that you're doing to improve it, that also establishes your credibility as a parent, right? And if a judge hears that, you're taking accountability, that means a great deal in court. So again, just be honest about your poor parenting behaviors you're not proud of, and also take accountability, and also talk about the successes you've had in cleaning up that bad behavior. So that's part of tip number 1. Tip number 2, do not blame the other parent for your poor parenting behavior. So if you're yelling at your ex, where people, maybe there'll be a witness to you yelling at your ex, or, at some point you sent her, curse words and cussed him out in text messages or emails, or any of that kind of stuff where it was obvious that you were angry. You don't blame that on the other parent, because that is not going to look good to the judge. So if you did any of those things, you're responsible for your own emotions. You're responsible for your own actions. So don't blame it on the other parent. You can just simply own it, as we said before. You want to say, Judge, that is a moment I'm not proud of. If I could go back and do that again, I would definitely do it. And so this speaks to the same thing I mentioned earlier, which is, if you've displayed this kind of behavior for a long time, when you know that you're going to court, clean it up beforehand. Start communicating better. Start keeping your anger in check. Start, doing the things that you know are the right thing to do. And just take accountability for it and clean it up. And that way, when you go to court, you know that you can say, I'm not proud of these moments. I'm in an anger management class, or, I've learned different coping mechanisms. And for example, I've done X, Y, and Z. So as long as you can present that it's wrong, you take accountability, and here's what you're doing about it, that's going to look really good for the judge. So tip number 3, do not blame your poor parenting behaviors or actions or decisions on the other parent. And here's an example of that. Let's say that you have an anger problem and you showed up and you were really angry to pick up the children and you were displaying erratic behavior and your ex kept the children from going with you. They made a choice to say, nope, it's not safe for the children to go. Now, we're not supposed to be, as parents, kind of just tossing court orders to the wind willy-nilly just because you feel it's the right thing to do. So I would not keep the children from the other parent, unless it's a very, very dangerous decision. And I would, in that case, go right up to the court and file a motion, because if you take matters into your own hands, it doesn't really matter your reasoning unless the children are going to be physically abused in some way. I don't know. It's got to be very serious in order for you to do that, so that you can justify it in court that you kept the children from them. So that's just a side note. But even if the other parent did keep the children from you and you displayed anger, you don't have a right to display that anger in any way that you want. You can't go unchecked. It cannot be, she kept the children from me, so therefore I did X. X is not justifiable, so you must not... So don't blame the other parent for your anger when she or he kept the children from you, right? You got to keep that in check and go the right way to manage that problem. Go back to court and file a motion to enforce that this other parent just willy-nilly decides when and where you can have your children. That you handle in court. Tip number 3 is don't try to present yourself as a perfect parent in court. The court knows none of us are perfect. And so when you try to do that and act like you don't do any wrong, or you don't have any behaviors that need improving, or you don't have communication things that you can improve upon, when you pretend like you don't have those issues, it diminishes your credibility in family court. And family court judges are assessing your credibility from the moment you walk in. Are you on time? Are you dressed appropriately? And when you go into court and you start testifying, now is not the time to pretend that you're perfect, because the judges have seen it all and heard it all, and they know none of us are perfect. And if they're parents themselves, they know they're not perfect. So I want to give you an example of my own case where I started when I was representing myself and he was represented by an attorney, an experienced attorney. I remember him testifying about how I missed 2 of our son's medical appointments in relatively short time, maybe a couple months or something. And so I was sitting there and I was so concerned about how that was going to look to the judge. And when the other side asked me questions when I was on the stand about that, they wanted to, really hone in on the fact that I missed 2 appointments. And I was thinking, goodness, do I have to be perfect? That's what I was thinking in my head. And oh my gosh, how's this going to look? And so when they asked me, why did I miss it? I guess they were trying to present that, I'm an absent parent or something like that. So I just explained the truth. And the truth was that our son had been diagnosed with something that's going to be a lifelong illness for him. And at the time that he was diagnosed, he had a lot more medical appointments and there was a lot more things to keep up with. And I started realizing very quickly that I had a calendaring system that I didn't think was going to be very effective for me. Obviously, I missed 2 appointments. And so at that time, I decided to transition to a new calendaring system. And I kind of explained that to the judge, or I explained it in the court why I missed it. And I said, I just sort of, when I was transitioning to keeping up with all his appointments and going to this new calendaring system, somehow those 2 got dropped off. To this day, I don't even know how they got dropped off, but they did. And now I've got it under control. I haven't missed any appointments since. And even before that, I didn't miss any appointments. So those were the 2. And at some point during the hearing, the judge commented on that. And she said something to the effect of, none of us are perfect. If you only miss 2 medical appointments as a parent, and that's the only thing you ever do, you're doing good. We mess up as parents. We can't do it all, especially if you're a single parent like mom is or dad is. They're single parents or whatever. You can't do it all, and you're going to fail sometimes. It's okay to fail sometimes. And that really resonated with me that, you don't have to be perfect, so you don't need to present yourself in court as being perfect. Tip number 4 is not to argue with any of the witnesses on the stand or with the other party. There's a proper way to handle yourself in court. There's rules of decorum and decency, and it's about being polite and courteous. So even if they're saying things that are an outright lie, that's what court is. The court is there to determine where the truth is. And so they have a structure in place for you to be able to expose those lies. And so the other side, if the attorney's doing their job or the other party is representing themselves and they're doing their job to represent themselves, they're going to try to make it appear that they're doing everything correctly. And that means stretching the truth. That means lying sometimes. That is not what I would advise you to do. Always tell the truth in court. But if you're going against a narcissist in court, there's going to be lies told. Their witnesses are going to be probably flying monkeys and be willing to do anything that narcissist wants them to do. And so you're going to hear a lot. Don't argue with any of them. The proper place to handle those lies is to expose them when you get on the stand. And so when you get on the stand, you can provide, enter evidence. There's a channel for doing that. You got to learn how to present evidence in court. But there's a proper way for you to be able to talk about those things when you get on the stand. And so that's when you handle the lies. Don't handle them by normal, everyday communication. People argue, people fight. That's not what you do in court. You have to use the proper channels and the structure and the rules of decorum and decency when you're in court. So tip number 4 is don't argue with any of the witnesses or the other side. Just have a poker face the whole time. Because if you can't keep your anger and emotions in check in court and you explode or let any of that stuff out, the first thing the judge is going to be thinking about you is, wow, if he does that here in the courtroom, I can imagine how he is outside of the court, right? So just keep your emotions in check. Practice keeping your emotions in check. Have a friend say all kinds of lies and, pretend you're in court and have your friend kind of say things like they're on the stand up and saying things about you. So that way you can kind of hear them, so you can become desensitized to them, and you can just keep your emotions in check and have a poker face when you're in court. My last tip is to manage your time appropriately. And what do I mean by this? So if you're representing yourself, you're going to have to call the court and find out, how long the court has set in your hearing for. So they might tell you half a day, they might tell you 2 hours, they might say an hour, they might say 2 days, whatever time they've allotted for you to do your hearing, you share that time with the other side. So if it says that it's an hour, generally that means you get about 25 or 30 minutes to present your side. If you have 2 days, roughly you'll have a day. And the way that it works in the court is like the plaintiff will go first as direct, and then you get to cross-examine that person, and they get to present witnesses. They get to ask them questions. You get to cross-examine each one, and then the plaintiff's side rests. And then it's your turn to get on the stand and present your case. And if you're presenting your own case, you have to do that on the stand. You're not going to have an attorney asking you questions. And then once you talk, then the other side gets to cross-examine you. And then you can bring your witnesses up and you can ask questions of them. The other side gets to cross-examine. And so all of that stuff has to be done in the time allotted for your hearing. So just get a rough estimate on how long you have to present your side and to do all the stuff that has to be done in the hearing, and manage your time appropriately. And you're not going to know exactly how long things are going to take if you're new to the family court system, or you don't know how many questions the other side's going to ask you. But to the best of your ability, use your time wisely. So how do you do that? Well, you want to figure out way before you go to court, what are the most critical things you want the court to know or you want the judge to know. And that's where you spend the time. Don't spend your time on issues that don't matter to the court. So, for example, let's say there's infidelity involved on the other side, right? Infidelity is not necessarily one of those critical issues for a family court system. Maybe it used to be years ago, but it's not now. Because the way judges feel, and I've heard this many times, is just because they're a bad spouse doesn't make them a bad parent. So don't spend your time that you have allotted for you talking about infidelity. You want to focus on the issues that matter most to your case. So what matters most is, how is that other side on being a parent? Do they show up consistently? Do they exercise their physical access? Or do they say, I can't come? Or they, how often are they missing physical access? Because that's key. If they're continuously missing physical access, then physical access with their children doesn't matter. That's a critical issue. If they are, not paying child support, or they're not, making sure the kids have a safe home life, like, do they have proper bedding? Do they have clothes? Do they have food? Focus on the issues that matter to a court when regarding custody. They want to know, how is that other side as a parent? If you can focus on that, that is what matters. So manage your time, use it wisely. Okay, that's all I have for now. I hope you got a lot out of this video. I hope these 5 tips were helpful to you. And if they were, please do give me a thumbs up below the video. That is really helpful to me. And do leave a comment if you have other tips. That if you've been in the family court system a while, leave us a comment. Let us know what other tips you have. As always, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.